So, man, thank you again for joining us on this podcast thing. So we're basically each of us, Rafiq and Ian and I, are each doing an interview, and we're doing like 3 volumes. We're doing this will be the 3rd volume, and the overarching theme is story. So today I just kind of want to. I kind of just want to hang out and chat, but that'll be kind of like our topic of the day.
Okay.
And I thought you would be a perfect person for this podcast because in addition to being a musical storyteller, you're a visual storyteller. You're a music director, creative director. And one of the things that I really admire about you as an artist is that you seem to be able to balance multiple disciplines. And you have a facility both technically and creatively across multiple disciplines, and it's something that I'm totally unlike. Like for me, I obsessed about music, but then that's where all the obsession ends. Yeah. And knowing you and watching you work, it's really amazing how you seem to be able to. You don't divide things up in the same way. You kind of approach everything.
Well, there's so many connections too. It's still like some creative theories that I have about how to make things are compatible in music and sound. For example, right now my whole brain is all about procedural creation, which is really an idea of creating processes with the computer that really help you build something, and that's something you can apply to music and to visuals.
So I've seen you. I've watched you work some. You do incredible CGI stuff, and I've sat and watched. You've shown me some of these processes where you apply a concept to you apply parameters to something, and then and it activates it, and you kind of like wait and you study and you capture certain. It's a lot like music in or at least the way I approach music, so I can relate to it. But how much of it is for you is like you say, activating a process and then discovering the story in it, and how much of it is you having a story in your mind and then using your tools to make it come alive?
It's always a balance. Like, for example, with the computer, which I think is my main instrument, really. I have an idea of a story, or I have a seed, and the concept of seed is really something that is super central to the idea of procedural work. It's that seed literally that you have at the beginning that develops over time through a process of algorithms and filters and equations, and that you put like a chain reaction, and then you kind of define these parameters, so you get a first result, and then that first result will inspire you to develop your story or your narrative, and then you go back into the chain and you change some parameters. Sometimes you just change the seed itself, and then go through the chain again and gives you a new result. It's almost like, sound-wise, it would obviously mean like a chain of devices that alter your sound and transform it. But it in the visual world, and especially with the tools that I develop, there's that multiplicity idea that from one seed you can get multiple different results that become really the panel of your colors and your textures and your images that create the final story. I'm really trying to develop that with sound now. It's almost like saying, oh, here's a note, a piano note, for example, and then there's a series of parameters that will alter that sound, but that are also conditional to what they receive, which means that you get this note, and in at a certain time in the process, you tell the machine, oh, if whatever you receive is more likely to be high harmonics and something very like solid and dense at the bottom, then you react like that. But the more it's going to be the opposite, then the more you react like that. And then depending on what you feed him, all these things are conditional and interact with what they're being fed. And the more you have some devices on the process, the more it becomes like infinite, the amount of results you can get.
I can totally relate to this, obviously, but I mean, so as someone who does a lot of music videos and a lot of work for filmic work for other clients. So you do a lot of work in the ad world, but you've done music videos for some of the biggest artists in the world. When you first approach, is your mind completely different in that in that world, because you have to approach those clients
since I work procedurally and I know the machine through machine learning, through procedural workflow can really help me. I tend to really think in a way when I write stories that the machine will help me more and more. So it's almost like you generate an image, but then you can do a Google search on one image and it give you another series of images that look like it, and then it can become this whole like tree of research. It's kind of like that. It's seeding the machine with the first batch of ideas and then orienting the research so that your storyline really develops from your initial ideas. And I also do that a lot because as every artist, I think I tend to have the same mechanisms over and over again. And I really like the idea of contradicting myself or finding a certain form of surprise in my work, and the machine is a super good tool for that. It's a good way to really...
So it's something I talk about, I find myself talking about a lot in interviews, is how I yearn for surprise. It's like, it's the thing I want to both steer, and like what you're talking about is applying all these parameters and listening and watching but continuing to steer, but each like turn of the wheel is ideally it's catalyzed by some aspect of surprise. That's, to me, that's what makes the process so amazing, working with machines, with machines that can learn you while you're learning its capabilities.
Exactly. It's really conversational to me. One second, I'm just going to get the...
That was so cute. Oh my gosh.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's cute. I was watching him in the background, like trying to figure out how to get out. It's so cute.
It's very... it's really conversational, and it's really about knowing the machine. The only thing it's always tricky for me, because it's always a balance between telling stories with the machine and letting the machine take control of it sometimes, but not losing the emotion, and not losing the humanity of things. And it's always something I have in mind. Like, when do I give too much control? When do I give too much control to the machine? When are my images too polished? When are my sounds too quantized? When are my sounds too controlled, too perfect, or too clean?
Yeah.
And I think it's been like there's a... In the procedural workflow that I work with, there's always that idea of finding a certain idea of realism in the images that I make. In a way, it's almost like in sound, it would be like, you don't want your piano to sound too much like a MIDI piano, but you want it to sound like something that's organic, that has an idea of variation and life and air and felt sounds and mechanisms. And so it sounds real and it's not repetitive. In image, I have the same kind of obsession sometimes. So it doesn't look like too CG, but it still has a bit of like variation and accidents within it that are important for me, that really help me bring back an idea of emotion. And I love the ambiguity that it's fake / real, that I think I've always been super interested about.
Yeah, I mean, those two things, I think, when we worked together a lot on your S16 record, that was one of the things that was immediately like simpatico with us, which is we love that line between the fake and the fake and the real, the familiar and the unfamiliar, but also this idea that you can never abandon the emotive quality of something.
Yes.
That ultimately that's the rule that can't be broken.
Yeah.
How does this resonate in my heart? But at the same time, even though I think we have that in common inherently, I learned a lot from you in the process of working on that record. Stay kind of like in a way more disciplined about it than I was. One of the things that I can do is I can get so enamored with the process and with the discoveries and the strange things that are happening, that I sometimes can lose sight of that emotive quality, or I can, in the process of discovering, I can abandon something that I shouldn't have,
I think it's about giving in these processes, which are kind of infinite. I've always tried to give myself a form of manifesto or a form of set of rules. Like, not really, in my case, like on S16, if I went far in production, I had to have super unproduced vocals, very simple, very raw, like almost one take, and not like keeping the level of production for the music that we made and keeping the vocals more towards the realm of songwriting.
Right.
So that there was always for me something comforting in the idea that it was not too alien. There was still an open door for emotion, and maybe I would make another record that's the complete opposite, which would be a super simple guitar folk record, but all the work would be on making the voice super bizarre, for example.
Right. Finding that balance.
It's just like
that contrast.
In that process, it's the same as a director. Is like, you can make whatever you want in production and special effects and CGI effects and whatever you want. At the end of the day, you have a story to tell, and I always come back to the original point, which is what is it that I'm trying to tell with this piece.
Right.
When I made Goliath, I had to talk about the fascination I had for scale, for the scale of a certain madness, and also the repulsion that I had for it. And it's always what I've always been connected to. And we shot it in a couple of locations. We also shot in a nuclear power plant. We shot in a hydraulic power plant. And at the end of the day, I killed the footage because I just realized that as much as I was happy with how the footage looked, it didn't really convey the story I wanted to convey. It just was a distraction. And I think
that's exactly the discipline that I'm talking about, which is the willingness to invest time and energy into something and resources, and yet remain honest and come out on the other end making decisions that serve the story and serve the ultimate goal.
I don't think anything is sacred in music. I only believe that the story you want to tell is the message you want to convey, and I think that's the absolute only thing that matters. And we talked a lot about that idea. Sometimes when you find a beat or a seed or something that is so precious, so sacred, when you find it and then you grow a song out of it, but then the seed disappears, like, which is the concept of a seed. It just like grows a tree, but then there's no seed at the end. That whatever you believe is sacred at some point will always not be at some point. So I think it's always kind of ephemeral, but the most important is is the original idea or the original story, or what matters really, that what really cuts through? Is it readable? Is it hearable? Does it
Yeah.
convey the emotion that you want to convey? And then if it doesn't, then you lost something sacred in the process to the profit of something that was not.
Right. Speaking of sacred and goals, I remember you and I had a heated discussion once about the role of the live show.
Yeah.
Do you remember our conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
was
basically your whole like philosophy was that, you know, everything in a musical project culminates in a live show, and if there is no live show, the live show is like the ultimate expression
It's
where
the peak for
your
me. Yeah,
connection, your live connection with the audience is paramount. And I, as someone who's like a lot less comfortable as a performer, although I've gotten a lot more experience and I enjoyed a lot more than I used to, you know, I come at it in a very different way. But I'm curious what your curious to hear you articulate.
Well, I mean, I haven't moved from that. I believe a lot in the concept of intellectual property, in a way that a song is something that is a concept, that is a part, that is lyrics, but that can take so many shapes. I mean, you've explored that in your reinventions of songs, and the idea that a song can be multiple, and it can. I only see the album as a testimony of what a song is at a certain moment in time. It's almost contractual for me. It's okay, here's a song, and it's almost like a birth picture, because really, what you hear in a song, when you hear someone singing in a song, you just hear the very first times a singer sing it. It's really a birth certificate almost. At best, I've sung a song 30 times when I record it in studio, and I will perform it hundreds and hundreds of times afterwards. So it will necessarily evolve. The way I'm going to invest the words, the way I'm going to sing it is going to change. I'm going to find new ideas that I probably better over time, thanks to live and direction to the audience. So that's why I believe the concert is something sacred, not in a way that I see a concert as one concert. I see a concert as performing music live over time. That's how I see the idea of live, is the idea that a song really takes its shape when it's morphing and changing every night. And I'm saying this knowing that I like live shows that are extremely
choreographed
faithful to the record.
Faithful to the record, yeah.
But with always a certain window of transformation that gives life to it.
Yeah.
And like I'm going to be touring again in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to play songs from my first record, and then I'm going to reinvent them with the kind of like aesthetic of the new one. But they're still the same songs, but I'm probably going to like these versions more than the original ones, because I've moved on and time has passed and I have other things to say.
I actually hear you in a different light than I originally heard you in our conversation. When you explain it as the live performance is not just another document, right? Because you're saying that the recorded song is like a document, almost like a birth certificate. It's capturing or a photograph. Whereas the performance, in our earlier conversation, I was thinking of it as another document. Whereas you're saying no, it's a living thing that evolves over time.
It can be. There's always concerts that remain. I wouldn't say that I like the versions that remain on YouTube more than I like the album versions, but I actually tend to not like filming concerts and giving away live versions, because I think that's the impermanence of it is something that's very precious, especially in the times of the streaming industry and whatever do around music today, which is about producing and fixating everything on tape, and then always producing content and blah 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 blah. Making something that's impermanent is just like music from the mouth to the ear and then nowhere else. I really like that idea. It's also there's something very pragmatic about this, is that I have more fun on stage than I have in studio. Realistically, I mean, I had a lot of fun making this record, but there's still something very intellectual about making a record in studio. It's like, because it's going to set the first stone of something that's going to take a lot of time afterwards. So it is heavy in a way. I take life much less seriously. Somehow.
Yeah, and the live show is like the opportunity to benefit from all the labor that you put into a record in a way, and to let it blossom into its own, flower. Speaking of planting seeds and stuff. Yeah. But isn't your tune Volcano that only exists as a video, right? Is there a recording?
No, I think we tracked it and we put it on Spotify or something. But it's a song that I developed exclusively for the live. Yes, it was thought for the live, and it's been filmed because we made some kind of light show on it, and but initially that is a live song. I don't even sing on it.
That's a great example of how you kind of think more holistically about, like, okay, so the first time I experienced that video, an incredible video, incredible performance. There's so much storytelling and so much beautiful imagery in it that, to me, when I saw it, like, the song is married to those images. I'll never be able to hear that song and not think of those drummers, like and like the whole the procession and all, like, there's something. The experience for me is audio visual, and I think more than anyone that I've worked with, you seem to attack your music with the future in mind, with meaning the visual in mind. I remember when we were working on S11 or S16, you had like, okay, these might be the songs I have videos in my mind for, and the songs were like still in their infancy, and you were already thinking way ahead.
To be honest, I think maybe a little bit too much on this record. I would do it differently if I went on in Europe. I would wait a little bit before I dive too much into visuals, because I got disappointed on many levels on this record on the making of the visual content, because this album took a lot of time to be made, and I think at the end of the day, it's almost like, ideas, they have a sort of freshness when they're new, and then they kind of rot a little bit because you move on and because you evolve. And I think when it was about time to really make them happen, they were not really fresh anymore, because that album took so much time. So it's either going to be about making albums faster and, making it as just a slice of energy, and then it's just like, or waiting before I move on too much to the visuals, because the process has been very rewarding on this, but a bit painful on a personal level.
No, I can see that.
Knowing that we started to work in 2016, January 2016.
Yeah.
So
that's right, January
it is a lot of time to make a record.
My 4-year-old son wasn't.
No, you weren't.
Wasn't
pregnant.
Even like he. Yeah, we weren't even pregnant. Yeah. So nuts, man. There's so many changes and evolutions. But you're also a busy guy. I mean, you were doing all kinds of stuff in between these.
I'm a little too much sometimes. I think the next, when this tour starts, I'm going to have to start to do less. And be a little just less, and grow a little bit. I think there's something very contemporary about this idea of like really questioning growth. That idea of like, oh, what's next that's bigger? Or maybe the next thing is smaller, actually.
Yeah.
and I can
right.
grow on many other levels. But that idea of like having so many projects at the time, like, is a bit exhausting. So I'm getting older. So
Yeah, I mean, I think among the silver linings of the pandemic for me was a little bit of that, which was obviously we, as a band, we were extremely prolific, but it's kind of because we couldn't do much else, right? You have to limit. We had to limit the scope of, all our interactions and our trips and no touring and all this stuff, and suddenly it's it's me in this room with this mic, and in a way that meant a kind of concentrated energy that we could sustain longer than I think we otherwise could, and maybe there's a lesson there to bring forward into the next season.
Yeah. I think it's also like I'm starting to reach the limits of making images and sound at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Which I've done a lot recently, which I think I'm going to restart, because my level of expectation is higher on both levels. As somebody, I have to focus myself fully on, like, at least for a long period of time. Because
I do remember that, working in that studio. I think it's right. You're in the same spot, right?
In
that
Paris.
We were in. Yeah. That room looks a little different.
Oh no! I'm in my studio now. I have my own studio, but at the time it was a fully different studio.
Yeah. But I remember in the next room we were working in separate rooms but near each other, and you'd go in to like work on lyrics, and then I would come in and you'd be at the PC and not at the Mac, and you'd be like doing some crazy CGI stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I'd be like, yo, so like how's that verse coming? And you're like, oh, I'm not working on it. But look what I did. I came up with this cool like,
yeah, that's the story of my life, and it's a bit I'm working on it. I have an amazing psychologist who's helping me redivide my brain a little bit and not fragmented it so much. Because it's such an idea of hyperactivity that is fun but not very fun all the time.
I can understand that.
I think I'm just calling it hyperactivity because it sounds good, but I'm just a mess. So I'm just
as your friend and someone who admires you, the positive side of that is that you are gifted in different ways.
Thank you.
I think it's more just maybe for you just parsing how to divide your energy.
It's just that it comes with a lot of like insecurity on many ways, on imposter syndrome and all these things, because you see, when I work with you, like you work full time on music. When I work with another director, he works full time on visuals. So I always, wherever I go, I always feel like I'm a bit of an imposter because I don't spend as much time as anyone else on every subject. So I'm always trying to like balance by a trader's amount of work and hours of work, but I know a lot of people will also work like a trader's amount of work. But I just developed a CGI double of me, and I'm planning to give him like a certain.
I remember when you were first telling me about that.
Yeah.
And
next step is now I'm fitting him with like AI patterns where it's gonna start to like be able to do stuff for me.
Are you gonna have a duet with yourself on the stage?
I could. Is starting to learn how to sing like me.
Amazing.
Literally.
Amazing.
I'm neural network fitting him with my voice, so he's learning how to sing like me.
Does he have a name, or are you calling him
Not
Johan?
really. The avatar, but it's kind of tacky.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wood Boy or something.
Woodkid 2. I don't know. I don't have a name. We should find him a name.
Okay. So, unfortunately,
that just pressed by mistake. I don't know. It's the keyboard. I didn't know it was making some sound. I don't know if it's tracking it.
Whoa.
I have no idea what this is. I don't know where it comes from.
It's kind of awesome. It's something Tanguy was working on.
This makes sub 37. Okay, that's random.
Well, I got to wrap it up now, but dude, thank you so much for
Thank you. It's
spending
amazing.
time. It's good to see your
Congratulations
face
on
again.
this hundreds of albums you've released
Yeah.
in the meantime. I don't know how you do it.
man.
It takes me 7 years to make one. I really admire that.